Okay, guys, today will be a very special episode. I was supposed to write about castles today, but I think I want to talk to you about philosophy instead. So, the thing is that I recently came across Cogent, which is a role playing game by Shad and Jazza from Shad University and Draw with Jazza. And it sort of rubbed me the wrong way, I would say. The game itself, I've had read through the rules. It's fine. It's generic, and it's fine. I mean, okay. I've seen better and I've seen worse. But again, this is just an alpha version, so I'm not expecting much from the game. So now I also have to say that I haven't played the game, so I don't know if it's good or bad to play. But that's not what I wanted to talk about today. The thing that rubbed me the wrong way was the reasoning behind its existence. And that is what I want to talk to you about today. So, on Cogent's introduction on their webpage, they state that we created Cogent Roleplay to address the rampant problems in many pen and paper role-playing games, such as, and then they start listing up the rampant problems with role-playing games. Now, I would say that is sort of the bad way to create a role-playing game. Actually, any kind of media of entertainment. Because, well, would you buy a book because the author thought that the other books were bad? No. And so I don't really like that kind of thinking when it comes to role-playing games. And I know that Shad and Jazza, they're premium content creators and they bring out good quality content on everything they do, on every platform. And so I think that having this as a design goal, it doesn't suit them very well. It doesn't suit them to say other role-playing games are bad and we're trying to fix it. But anyways, I do recognize what they're saying in these rampant problems that they're talking about, because there is a core issue in role-playing games that has to be addressed. And, well, I think Cogent, they are listing up the symptoms of problems in role-playing games, and they're blaming it on everything else than what is the core problem of role-playing games. And that core problem is the people around the table. That is where our problem is lying. We, as players of role-playing games, we are not educated enough in role-playing games. And that is why these symptoms of the other problems are popping up. And we want other people to solve these problems for us rather than solving them ourselves. And I will be going through the list here of problems that Shad and Jazza are listing up as the rampant problems in role-playing games, and I will show you that all of these problems are specifically linked to how people play role-playing games and why you shouldn't play role-playing games in that manner, and why Cogent can't fix these problems, because the problems aren't other role-playing games. It is the people sitting at the table reading the rules of those role-playing games. So, let's go with the first issue that they're listing up here. Game systems and rule sets made purely to make money, where the core rules are incomplete so they can sell endless expansions with new character classes, skills, and rules. And yes, I do agree that role-playing games, they pump out content for their role-playing games. That's what they do. That's how they make money. They create new content for more people. But I don't think that this is the core issue. I think that the core issue is that there's a demand for it. And I don't think that role-playing games specifically make incomplete rules and then sell expansions on them. I think that they make complete rules, but that people around the table misinterpret these rules and demands clarification. And here's a good example of this. Tools in D&D 5th edition. If you look at page 154 in D&D 5th edition Player's Rulebook, there's the list of tools. Now, there's half the page is filled with a table with different tools that you can buy. Then you have half the page which is just filled with, which is just descriptions of what all these tools do have and sort of a loose idea of how they function. And there's one paragraph in the whole book that explains what tools does. And here's the paragraph. A tool helps you do something you couldn't otherwise do, such as craft and repair an item, forge a document, or pick a lock. Your race, class, background, or feats give you a proficiency with certain tools. Proficiency with tools allows you to add your proficiency bonus to any ability check you make using that tool. Tool use is not tied to a single ability, since proficiency with tools represent broader knowledge of its use. So yeah, that's what tools are. That is the whole rules for tools. And are those rules incomplete? No, they specifically say what tools are supposed to do. You have a tool proficiency, you get a proficiency bonus when you use that tool. That's not a very complicated rule. It's a complete rule. It doesn't say anything specific. It's not incomplete. It specifically says to you which scenarios tools can be used and what the bonus is for using them. But then you can start to say, well, what happens if I use a thieving tool and sleight of hand? I can only get one proficiency bonus. What happens? Do I get the proficiency bonus of sleight of hand? Why do I need to use tools then if I don't get anything from it? And again, yes, this is a conflict within the rules. What happens if you have a situation where you have two different options that give you proficiency bonus when the rules say you can only utilize one? Well, the obvious answer is that tools are useless and they should not be there and they should have a different purpose, and D&D and Wizards of the Coast should clarify this to me so that I can utilize tools more efficiently. I mean, no, of course not. That's not the solution. The solution is, well, you get an advantage, or you lower the DC, or you make an automatic success or something. I mean, just roll with it. Somebody's trying to use sleight of hand while also using a tool. Good for them. Do something. But then they published Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And Xanathar's Guide to Everything is built upon Unearthed Arcana, which are freely published development rules that the D&D are publishing and giving out to the community, getting feedback, and then redoing everything that they think would work with this. And, well, They did that with Sander's Guide, and now there's suddenly, in that book, there's 8 pages with the use of tools. They expanded the rules for tools. Well, why? Well, because the rules were incomplete. They weren't useful enough. And it says so, this is the first paragraph in the tool section in Sander's Guide. Tool proficiencies are a useful way to highlight a character's background and talents. That is the implicit thing that tools are for, that D&D specifically didn't say in the core rulebook. They just said, yeah, these are tools. Yeah, here you go. You can use tools to get proficiency bonuses. But they didn't specifically tell you why tools were in the game. And now they explicitly say tools are flavor. They're used for flavor. If you want to min-max your game, don't use tools, because they're purely there for flavor. And then they continue saying, at the game table though, the use of tools sometimes overlaps with the use of skills, and it can be unclear how to use them together in a certain situation. This section offers various ways that tools can be used in the game. And yes, so the problem wasn't that the rules from the core rulebook was incomplete. It was that people read those rules and didn't come up with ways to use tools. So the problem was the people reading and people using the framework that is the rulebook from core edition. They didn't go in and say, oh, well, I can use tools because I think it's cool to have a mason's tool, and maybe I can use it in some situation that could be flavorful and fun for role-playing games. No, they said, well, tools overlap with skills, so I need clarification to figure out what can I do to utilize tools more efficiently. And then D&D replied with 8 pages of new rules for how tools should be utilized. So again, the core issue of this problem isn't that game systems just pump out expansions, it's that people don't do those expansions themselves. They don't sit and say, well, why can't you get an advantage on that roll? Or why can't you just get an automatic success on that roll? Because, it doesn't quite matter. We're just friends sitting around a table rolling dice. It doesn't matter if you have advantage or not. But again, if that's not the mindset of the people reading the rules, if they want the rules to be specific in explaining to them all these conflicts that occur during the gameplay session, they will automatically say that tools are inefficient, they're not supposed to be in the game, you should fix this, please fix this, Wizards of the Coast. So yeah, that is a problem, and again, it's linked to people around the table. Okay, next problem here. Rules that are restricted to game settings, forcing you to buy a whole new rulebook and learn new mechanics to play in another world. Again, I'm sort of there, right? My game is specifically made for Castle Everhollow. It has one purpose, one story. You can't play any other story with my rules because it's specifically this story that I'm telling with the rules that I have. And I might expand it someday, maybe, or make another role-playing game that is for another project. But I'm completely on the opposite side of the spectrum. I want more specific games for specific purposes. I don't want one generic game that encompasses everything I do and want. And I don't think that Shad and Jazza want that either. I mean, I read Shadow of the Conqueror. It's a fantastic book. It was the book that tipped me over to subscribe to Audible. His was my first ever audiobook. And I loved it. The problem is that if Shad had said, instead of writing his own book for his own universe, for his own story, but instead he would write a book that would be, yes, this is a book that can contain everything you want in a book. I'll have dragons, I have laser swords, I'll have airships and modern planes. Everything is going to be there. You can read everything you want in this book. It's going to be comedy, it's going to be romance, it's going to be high-packed action and horror. Yeah, that is definitely not a book that I want to read. I would much rather read 100 books with 100 specific stories than one that encompasses all of them. And I would much rather have D&D and Edge of the Empire rather than a D&D-esque game that has Star Wars characters. And again, this is a problem that lies with the people around the table. Because if you don't want to invest in this hobby, if you want to say, I spent 2 hours reading the core rules of Cogent, now all entertainment within role-playing games should come to me, and I should not invest any more time in learning new rules or new mechanics or new types of way to play stories, because now I've invested those 2 hours that are mandatory for me to play role-playing games. That is not how role-playing games work. I would much rather have one intricate game mechanic that really forces you to think in a specific way. One day, and maybe the next day, play a completely different game with completely different rules. I mean, that's why, for instance, I love Dread. Because you have the Dread Jenga Tower, or Tower of Dread, which, because you can't copy the trademark Jenga towers, but you have that mechanic of using a Jenga tower, and it won't work for any other stories than specifically survival horror stories. That is specifically how that mechanic would work. And I don't want that mechanic to be in any other type of game. I want it to be in survival horror. If I want to play a survival horror game, I'll play Dread. If I want to play something else, I don't want Dread to expand their rules so that they could play D&D. Because that is just wrong. So next issue that they're talking about here. Poor game structures that are kept purely for tradition's sake, preventing innovation. And I don't see that much. I see it in poorly written games, sure, and many people write those games. But I think that many of the big games, they are already in 2nd or 3rd or 5th edition or many other editions, and of course they should keep their traditions, because I don't think that they should alienate the players from the previous editions. But I think still this here is still the problem of the people around the table. If the still mindset of the players around the table are, I still just want to invest those 2 hours into my role-playing game experience so that I can play role-playing games. Well, then there's a market for people that create D&D-like clones set in different worlds that are not D&D. And that is what you get. Because, again, there's a demand for it. The next problem that they're listing here is huge, overly complex rules that make it extremely difficult for new players and bog down gameplay with redundant processes. Again, yeah, they do exist, complex rules in role-playing games, but again, there are people that like those type of rules and that type of gameplay, and I don't think that's inherently bad. I think that's just a preference. And I don't think that any role-playing game have redundant rules. I mean, yes, they do have complex variants where there exist simple variants, and I myself tend to like the simple variants, but I do know a lot of people that like the complex versions and want to play that game. And I don't think that's inherently bad. Again, yes, it is a problem if you say it is extremely difficult for new players. But again, complex rules in role-playing games are not supposed to cater to new players. I mean, if you're a new gamer and wants to play some video games, you don't start out with Dark Souls, because Dark Souls isn't the game for you. You start out with something simple, something easy, something enjoyable, something less stressful. And if you at some point think that, yes, these games are actually too simple and I want to have something more challenging for me, then you play Dark Souls. And that's the whole point of role-playing games. We want a spectrum, we want a diversity, we want multiple different games giving us multiple different experiences so that we can choose from them. We don't want every game to be beginner friendly, because that would alienate those that don't like beginner friendly games. The next problem that they're listing here is really something that rubs me the wrong way, and I think it's, well, I really don't like it. It's things that prevent players' creativity. And I've never ever seen any role-playing game that prevents player creativity. Absolutely no role-playing game that I've ever seen or ever played has ever hampered my creativity. What has hampered my creativity are other players. And again, this is a problem if I as a player or I as a GM says, I want this gameplay experience, I want us to do this, I want to change up the rules so that I can do this instead of that. But if the other players around the table says, well, no, that's not according to the rules. Firstly, all of them are wrong in the assumption of what rules are. And secondly, they're hampering the creativity. So I think that you can't solve this with Cogent. You can't make people be more creative with your game, because you will end up with the same problem as everyone else, that you're playing with other players, and if they don't want to be creative with you, and if they want to stick to the rules as hard as they can, well, then you're stuck there. The last problem that they're listing here are role-playing games that put the mechanics before the true purpose of pen and paper RPGs, the narrative you create with your friends. And again, I've never met or seen any role-playing game that does this. I've never seen any role-playing game saying, we want game mechanics to be the core part of our role-playing game. I've never seen it. I mean, I've seen board games do it, and I've seen people wanting a more board game-like role-playing game and eventually ending up creating a board game instead of a role-playing game. But still, a role-playing game is inherently for the narrative you create with your friends, and nothing changes that. And what they might be talking about here is that, well, there are many role-playing games out there that don't explicitly tell you that you can create your role-playing games as you want. They don't teach you to be a player of role-playing games. They just say, here are the rules, then figure out the rest. I think that this is again a core problem of being a role-playing gamer. That you should want to play different games. You should want to play different experiences. And you should be as creative as you want. And you should never feel that the rules are bogging you down. If the rules are not right for you, you change the rules to suit you, or you choose a different game. There are plenty of options of D&D-like games, or Star Wars games, or horror games, or magic-related games, or modern games, science fiction games. There's so many games out there. And you can pick up and play all of them if you like. But if you sit there as a player and you say, I don't like these rules because I don't understand them, and I want more rules to clarify it, but I want them to be simpler because I don't want to learn more complex rules, then that is the inherent problem of you as a role-playing gamer. And it's nothing that Cogent can solve, and it's nothing that any other role-playing game can solve. This is something that we as people need to solve in ourselves. And I think that actually D&D addresses this quite nicely in their Sandler's Guide to Everything. And it says there in the introduction of the game, one rule overrides all others. The DM is the final authority on how the rules work in play. Rules are part of what makes D&D a game rather than just improvised storytelling. The game rules are meant to help organize and even inspire the actions of a D&D campaign. The rules are a tool. And we want our tools to be as efficient as possible. No matter how good those tools might be, they need a group of players to bring them to life and a DM to guide their use. The DM is key. Many unexpected events can occur in a D&D campaign, and no set rules could reasonably account for every contingency. If the rules tries to do so, the game would become a slog. An alternative would be for the rules to severely limit what characters can do, which would be contrary to the open-endedness of D&D. Here's the path the game takes. It lays a foundation of rules that the DM can build on, and it embraces the DM's role as the bridge between the things the rules address and the things they don't. And so if you sit around the table and you're not satisfied with the experience you're having, don't blame the rules. Don't blame blame the role-playing games. Don't blame the industries. Blame yourself and the people around you. Because that is where the answer is. And I think that Cogent can be a good game. And I want it to be a good game. Because then just more good role-playing games are out there. And I don't think that Shad and Jazza are bad people or that they're misunderstanding, but I think that, well, if they can address this problem through them as inspiring people, and they can tell you that this is what a role-playing gamer is, and this is what you're supposed to do with that knowledge. And yeah, I think that's what I needed to say. So, next episode, I'll be doing castles again. And yeah, that's about it for today. And again, share, like, and subscribe. I really like that people are starting to invest in this channel. So I'm very grateful for you guys here. And I'm sad that I had to sort of come with a ranty thing today. But again, it's something on my mind, and I think that it's important for us to discuss this, to think and criticize ourselves and our behavior in the role-playing game community rather than the role-playing games themselves. So yeah, again, next video, castles, and please share, like, subscribe, and share this with your DM, GM, narrator, whoever. They'll probably like it. So yeah, see you around.